Throughout the history of the NBA, there have been countless brutes and enforcers that teams will keep on their roster for that extra spirit, toughness, and edge. From Bill Laimbeer, Charles Oakley, Udonis Haslem, to Rasheed Wallace, Anthony Mason, Rick Mahorn, and Xavier McDaniel. Players like these once held a hugely valuable place in the NBA. But about 15 or so years ago, the brutes and enforcers began losing their value, thanks to perimeter-oriented basketball and a much less physical game being played overall in the NBA. But going way back to the 1980s, there was a special player who originally set the standard for being an enforcer. And on top of that, he just so happened to be one of the most gifted players in the history of the NBA. Any guesses who that could be? Now, when you think of the 90s Bulls, Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen usually steal the spotlight. But let's not forget about the Worm, Dennis Rodman, the unsung hero, the glue that held the team together. Rodman was a key player, racking up 5 NBA championships and landing himself a spot in the Hall of Fame. Starting with the Pistons, Rodman was a perfect fit for the Bad Boys era. Tough defense, aggressive rebounding, those were his trademarks. Then came the Bulls, where he did all the dirty work while MJ worked his magic on the court. And by dirty work, I mean pesky defense, hard fouls, relentless trash talking, and getting under the skin of some of the NBA's biggest stars. Karl Malone, Shawn Kemp, Shaq, you name them, Rodman got into their heads and was a literal nightmare. And let's not forget about his off-the-court antics. I mean, this guy colored his hair every color of the rainbow, married himself, and kicked a cameraman for crying out loud. So while today's players might seem a bit crazy, they've got nothing on Dennis Rodman. He was the definition of wild, intimidating, and downright insane. But regardless of how NBA fans view Dennis Rodman, those who either played with him or competed against him know the kind of rare talent this man was. Isaiah Thomas clearly knows a thing or two about the greatness of Dennis Rodman. He had the opportunity to play with him on a championship-winning team, seeing up close and personal, maybe the most interesting athlete to ever play in the NBA. He praised Rodman's exceptional rebounding skills and how they impacted the game, mentioning that Rodman's ability to secure rebounds was so surgical from a mental standpoint that he became the greatest rebounder ever thanks to his mind. In fact, Charles Barkley said it best about Rodman. It really just came naturally to him, saying, "You read in the newspaper that he was out every night, all night, and to have the stamina that he had, it's pretty remarkable. He killed that you need a good night's sleep theory." I did try to get a good night's sleep every now and then. But guys, what many of us aren't talking enough about isn't his approach to rebounding the basketball. Instead, it was Rodman's defense. And I'm about to give you just a peek into how dominant of a defender Rodman was in his time.
Set yourself out to accomplish a goal, and then all of a sudden you achieve it, no matter what it is, I promised myself I wouldn't break down if I wanted to, but it hit me, and it was a great feeling for me.
That was Dennis Rodman in literal tears after winning the 1990 Defensive Player of the Year award. The one time in NBA history that I can recall a player experiencing that level of emotion by winning such an award. But it dawned on me, he really did want it that bad. And that desire only made him the greatest defender of his generation. Michael Jordan had quite a bit to say about Dennis Rodman and their time together as teammates on the Chicago Bulls. In the ESPN documentary series The Last Dance, which aired in 2020, we got an in-depth look at the Bulls' final championship season in 1997-98. And Michael Jordan shared his thoughts on Rodman's unique personality and contributions to the team, giving many NBA fans an insight into just how dominant Rodman actually was. Because let's face it, today's fans were either too young or weren't even born when Dennis was in his heyday. But look, in episode 3 of The Last Dance, Jordan talks about the importance of Rodman's rebounding and defensive skills. He acknowledges that while Rodman's off-court antics and lifestyle choices could be unconventional, his dedication on the court was unwavering. Jordan even expressed that Rodman's presence on the Bulls was vital for the team's success, especially considering his ability to neutralize opponents' top rebounders and provide the team with second-chance opportunities. But here's the deal about MJ's perspective of Dennis. He was talking about a much older version of Dennis Rodman, a well past his prime Dennis Rodman. Imagine how great Rodman must have been in his Pistons days, when he was winning championships even before Michael Jordan. This play needs some context. It's the defending champion Detroit Pistons up against the upstart Houston Rockets, led by arguably a top 5 player and best big man in basketball, 27-year-old Hakeem Olajuwon, at the peak of his powers. On the other side of the ball was Dennis Rodman, a powerhouse defensive stopper in just his 4th season in the NBA. And on the last possession in regulation, Rodman is smothering Hakeem as soon as the ball is inbounded. Everyone on the floor knows Houston's looking to get the ball to Hakeem. So watch how Rodman fronts Hakeem at the start of the play, and then keeps his hits glued to Hakeem, even as the ball handler works towards the opposite side of the court. Seriously, Rodman's defensive IQ was off the charts for a guy who had only been in the league for 4 years. He maintained contact with Hakeem even as the ball handler was standing on the right wing, because he began to sense that Hakeem was going to curl inside and try to pin Rodman underneath the basket. But Rodman's ability to sniff out what was happening allowed him to stick with Hakeem and made for a pretty rough entry pass. Instead, it was actually Rodman who backed Hakeem deep under the basket, because he couldn't routinely catch the pass and get a good look. And already in position, Rodman perfectly sets up and times his jump to block Hakeem's shot. Defensive mastery at its finest.
Exactly what Phil Jackson did not want. There's the whistle before the shot. An illegal defense call against the Bulls.
Well, Dennis Rodman has had some success with playing Shaq. Even though Dennis only weighs about 218 pounds, he has a strong low base, able to push Shaq a little bit further.
That just blows my mind, seriously. Did you hear what the announcer just said? He said that Dennis Rodman weighed around 218 pounds. So let me get this straight. A 218-pound Dennis Rodman was tasked with guarding a man that was easily 300 pounds in Shaquille O'Neal. I know that the NBA is about heart over height when it comes to undersized players, but size never mattered. At least not for the manically passionate Rodman, who gave every last breath on defense. Just look at him here again.
Mostly what Dennis Rodman has is a strong will. Put his body on the line against Shaq. Three-pointer, no good.
Shaq was so used to being able to effortlessly move defenders out of the way, but he could hardly get a guy to move who was at least 80 pounds lighter than him. Unfortunately for Shaq, switching teams wouldn't help alleviate Rodman as his kryptonite. Just a couple of months into the following season, Shaq and Rodman would meet again on December 17, 1996, the first time that Shaq, as a Laker, met Rodman. Shaq was still Shaq, of course. 24 years old, averaging 26, 12, and 3 blocks per game. And just 4 days before meeting Rodman and the Bulls, Shaq hung 34 points on the Portland Trail Blazers, with 7 assists and 6 blocked shots. And in the first half against the Bulls on December 17th, Shaq was doing Shaq things. 23 first-half points on 10 made field goals. The Bulls coaching staff waited long enough to give Rodman the Shaq assignment. And when they finally did, suddenly, Shaq didn't look like Shaq anymore. Shaq did his thing, but only when he was being defended primarily by Bill Wennington in the first half. 23 points and playing like the most unstoppable offensive force in the entire league. All of that changed though when Rodman was inserted as the primary defender on Shaq. Forget dominating and scoring points. Shaq only managed to put up 5 shots in 20 minutes of action in the second half. I think it's reasonable to say that Rodman got the best of Shaq while Rodman was still in his prime as a defender. And if Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, the 2 superstars on the team, are pulling you away from potentially picking up a technical foul or an ejection, you know you are undoubtedly valuable to the team. Heck, if Michael Jordan, the GOAT, wants you to stay in the ballgame, it's saying a whole lot. 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards are indicative enough of Rodman's greatness on the defensive end. But you really had to watch closely to get a better appreciation of the kind of defender Rodman actually was. Being Shaq's toughest defender should be enough evidence, honestly. But Rodman's peers have always spoken so highly of Rodman.
But when you talk about the greatest athletes to ever play in the NBA, I think Dennis Rodman is in that category. When you think about the stamina, what you talked about, Charles, just the way he lived his life and to be able to play with that kind of energy night after night, the way he could run, especially early when he was with the Pistons and he would chase people down and guard every position. That guy could have been a world-class triple jumper or 400-meter sprinter. I mean, he was incredible. And Shaq,
he was a winner. He was a leader. And his basketball IQ is off the charts. And I had an opportunity to experience that playing alongside him.
MJ recruited Rodman to the Bulls for the same reasons described by Scottie Pippen. If the greatest player of all time needed you to win 3 more championships, you've won in your career already. Before joining MJ, Rodman was getting the better of Air Jordan in all those intense Pistons-Bulls 80s matchups. They don't make him like Dennis Rodman anymore. A GOAT in his own right.